So I call to order the regular meeting of the Kenai City Council for October 16, 2019. This is Councilmember Malloy speaking. The reason I'm speaking is that our mayor, Brian Gabriel, has an excused absence for family business to be out of state, and our vice mayor, Tim Navarre, is participating telephonically. So after the Pledge of Allegiance and the roll call, we'll do an election of a temporary chair just for this meeting. Would you, if you are able to, would you please rise and for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, if you'd please call the roll.
Councilmember Malloy.
Here.
Vice Mayor Navarre.
Here.
Councilmember Nackstedt.
Here.
Councilmember Petty.
Here.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Here.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Here.
Chairman Malloy, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Council, may I have a motion to suspend the rules and elect a chair pro tem? Councilmember Nackstedt.
I'd go ahead and move went on and off, excuse me, to recommend Bob Malloy be the chair pro tem.
Second.
Thank you. What's the pleasure?
Can I ask unanimous?
Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, I'll continue to ask as chair. Next we have on the agenda item A3, election certification. Can I have a motion to certify the election results of the October 1, 2019 municipal election?
So I move to, certify the election.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Second.
Thank you. The motion has been seconded. Would council like the clerk to read the certification into the record, or do you want to just approve it as is?
I would like it read into the record.
Okay. Madam Clerk, if you would please read the certification into the record.
Thank you, Chair Malloy. So for candidates for mayor, we had one, Brian Gabriel, received 532 votes. We had 36 write-in candidates. For city council, we had two candidates listed. They were to elect two on the list. Glenise Petty received 354 votes. Jim Glendenning received 409 votes, and there were 54 write-ins. We had two propositions. Proposition A was asking voters if the Kenai Charter should be amended to eliminate the requirement that a person running for mayor or council submit a nominating petition signed by 20 or more registered city voters. That proposition failed with 364 votes. 253 voted yes. And Proposition B was another question asking the voters if the charter of the city of Kenai should be amended to provide that the terms of office of the mayor and other council members begin the Monday following certification of the election, instead of at the second regular meeting of the council after their election. And that one passed with 454 votes and 155 voted no.
Thank you. Council, are there any objections to the certification of the election?
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Are there any objections? Vice Mayor Navarre?
No objection.
There being no objections, the election is certified. Now we move on to the fun part of the meeting. Congratulations to our newly elected council members and Mayor Gabriel. This is item A4, administer the oaths of office. Madam Clerk, would you please administer the oath of office to council members Glendenning and Petty? And then Mayor Gabriel will be at another meeting.
Right. You guys want to stand up and turn your microphones on and raise your right hands? I state your name.
I,
I, Jim
Glennies Petty,
Glendenning,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America,
the laws and ordinances of the City of Kenai,
the laws and ordinances of the City of Kenai,
and that I will honestly,
that I will honestly,
faithfully, and impartially
faithfully, and impartially
perform the duties of City Council Member
perform the duties of City Council members
of the City of Kenai, Alaska,
of the City of Kenai, Alaska,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
All right. I have stuff for you to sign later.
All right, thank you.
Before moving on to agenda approval, I'd like to draw your attention to the laydown you should have in front of you with the requested revisions to the agenda and packet. And this is to add to item J1, the city manager's report, Public Works mid-month report requested by the city manager. And would we have a motion to approve the agenda? Councilmember Naxted.
I'll move to approve the agenda with the, one addition.
Thank you.
I'd se-
Councilmember Peterkin.
I was just gonna second it.
Thank you. The agenda has been moved and seconded.
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Thank you, Councilmember Naxted. Is there any objection?
No objection.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Navarre. There being no objection, the agenda is approved. Next, we have item A6, the consent agenda. What is the pleasure of council regarding the consent agenda? Councilmember Naxted.
I move for approval of the consent agenda and request unanimous consent.
Thank you.
No
I'll
objection.
second that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Peterkin has seconded it. It's been moved and seconded. Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there any objection to the consent agenda? Vice Mayor Navarre?
No objection.
Thank you. Seeing and hearing no objection, consent agenda is approved. Is there anybody from the general public who would like to speak to any item on the consent agenda? The consent agenda are the items that are denoted with an asterisk next to it. Seeing no one, we will, the consent agenda is approved. Next item is B, scheduled public comment. We have none. Now we're moving on to item C, unscheduled public comment. Is there anyone from the public wishing to comment at this time? Thank you. Please come forward, Dr. Hanson, and please state your name for the record and address, please. And you have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Peter Hansen. I live at 418 Rogers Road in Kenai, Alaska. So, Council, I'm here tonight just to give all of you a brief update on the Witch Doctor's Cabin/Museum and where we are. It's been about 6 months since I had the privilege of being here, meeting with all of you, and a lot's happened since then, but doesn't show much yet. In July, we were prepared on the south side of the visitor center to auger some holes and place the cabin. However, city administration discovered that the NSTAR has a significant right-of-way on their high-pressure 5 or 6 inch pipeline that was going right underneath the cabin, and and this meant that we really couldn't put the cabin where we wanted to put it. In the meantime, we had moved the steam donkey and a couple of things around in that area in preparation for this. But Pete Hansen, being a little bit naive about building permits, waited until a few days before we were going to auger the holes to go and see about getting a building permit, and that's when Public Works Director discovered, oops, you can't do that. And so that gave us a little bit of a delay. Let's see. So September, we got a group together. The city manager, Public Works Director, building inspector, Joe and June Harris, and Councilman Jim Glendenning was with us, and myself, and we looked over areas around there that we could place the cabin, And there was a nice area between the cabin on the north side, on the north side of the visitor center, is what I'm trying to say, between the visitor center and the highway. And so that's where we plan to put it, and I hope that all of you as council people will approve that, because today the building inspector issued the permit, and tomorrow we're gonna auger the holes, put in the sonotube, fill them with concrete, and we'll have the first phase of preparation underway. And so hopefully, in 2 weeks, the cabin will be moved. The log cabin is completely finished. It's of course been built out in the Kiski by a logsmith by the name of Arnie Sellinger, and that's his hobby and his business is building log structures. It's kind of interesting. This it's been an interesting experience for me in working with building inspector and the engineers because there are no specifics in building codes about how to build log cabins and what you have to do or what you can't do, and trying to create the structure and the right anchors, and so it's taken a good bit of teaching by a logsmith to the engineers to help design what we needed to have for the building inspector to get this job done. But that's part of the reason it's taken about 5 or 6 months to come through this whole progress. But we're going to have a nice project, I think, when we're all done. And as soon as we can, I'm working with good effort after we get the cabin moved to get the steam donkey put back where it was. The Historical Center would like that, and I think it'll look a lot better, and that really we need to do that. But it's been kind of a tough thing. Can't really handle all these things at the same time, but some of them do kind of work together. And in a couple of weeks, with the help of Robert Peterkin's building crew, we're going to get that move made. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Hanson. Certainly appreciate the update. Would you mind taking questions from council if they have any? Does anyone from council have any question or comment for Dr. Hanson? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, just thanks, Doc Hanson, for coming forward with the project. It'll be a nice looking addition to our area, and it should fit right where it's going to go, and there's a lot of love and effort went into it, and we all appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. I don't really have too much question. I know I was a little bit involved and heard about the gas line, and that was kind of a setback there, and now that there's a place for it to go, it sounds like we're finally underway here. So that's exciting to hear, and hopefully we get it going soon.
Good. We knew that there was a gas line there all the time from day one, and NSTAR came over 2 different times. Fellows came over to one time to mark the place, another time to show where we could auger the holes, and tell me that they needed to have somebody on site whenever we were augering these holes. But no one said anything about a right-of-way for the gas line, and fortunately, the building inspector, I think, is the one that really caught that, and that's what happened. Yeah.
Vice Mayor Navarre, did you have any question?
No questions.
Thank
I
you.
know this has been a long project, but I'm glad it's finally getting to the final stages. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Navarre. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to comment on anything not on the agenda? Yes, please come forward, and both of you, and you could say your names and place of residence and have 3 minutes. Thank you.
My name's John Taylor from Kenai, 1016 2nd Street, and most of you know me from Artistic Puppy that I've run and operated here for many years. And recently, about 8-9 months ago, I joined up and partnered with Coy here, Coy West, whom I introduce. Now I'm with Divining Point, and the city has asked us to come and help with some of the marketing. So that's kind of fun, and just want to introduce Coy and let you get to know him because he's a newer face here.
So I appreciate you giving us this opportunity to speak. My name is Coy West. I am originally from Dallas, Texas. I now live in Austin, Texas, where I moved after serving in the Navy for 4 years. I'm very delighted to have the opportunity to work with the city of Kenai. We have worked together in a very short amount of time with the Silver Salmon Derby, which we really enjoyed that particular experience. John joined our team, and we kind of fused together our agencies, and the entire time he kept telling me about this place, and finally brought me here in February, and I was thoroughly delighted with what I saw. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both. Does any of council have any questions? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, what is your scope of work going to be in your relationship with the city?
Yes, sir. So the scope at this point is I think, being thoroughly defined. One of the things that we're looking forward to is really finding those qualities and characteristics about the city of Kenai that make it unique, not only to the Kenai Peninsula, but also Alaska and the greater U.S. Our hope is to be able to tell a story about the city of Kenai that not only builds pride in the residents and the citizens of Kenai, but also attracts others who may want to do business here in Kenai, who may want to relocate or potentially visit the city for vacation.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Thank you, Mayor, or Mr. Malloy. So are you working with the chamber as well, the Chamber of Commerce?
So we partnered with the chamber for the Silver Salmon Fishing Derby, the Derby. That was a fantastic experience. Considering the role of the chamber and the mission that they have, it's instrumental that we're involved with the chamber, have a close relationship. Obviously, if we're looking to try and make Kenai something of a business-friendly community, I think it's really important for us to foster a great relationship with them.
Is there any other questions or discussions from council?
Just real quick, just
Yes, Councilmember Peterkin.
I'd just like to say we appreciate you coming, introduce yourself, and I'm sure through Paul we'll hear more about what you guys are doing, but it's good to have you guys come tell us as well, so I really appreciate that.
Councilmember Petty.
Yes, I want to thank y'all for coming, and I just want to say congratulations on your poster that y'all created for the Silver Salmon. That was very lovely and frame-worthy quality, and so I look forward to seeing other opportunities on how you're going to landscape our lovely city. So thank you for being here.
I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah.
And thank you both for making the long journey to Kenai to introduce yourselves and your business. We look forward to what you're going to do for the city of Kenai. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to council about any item that's not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to public hearings. Item D1, our first public hearing is ordinance number 3089-2019, amending Kenai Municipal Code Section 115-040 agenda to revise public notice requirements and amend the agenda packet preparation, distribution, and publication, administrative policies and procedures to make standard revisions and housekeeping changes, sponsored by Council Members Malloy and Naxted. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxted.
I move to enact ordinance 3089, 2019.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Like to second that.
Is there anybody from the general public who would like to speak to ordinance 3089-2019 tonight? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for discussion. And if I may, I'd like to pass the gavel to Council Member Naxted so that I could just introduce it, and then you could pass it back to me. You know, yeah. Or are you sure? Well,
I could keep it going.
you could keep, yeah. Well, how do we? Why don't we see how it goes? Okay. So thank you. This ordinance begins on page 6 of the packet, and as stated in one of the whereases, the original impetus from this ordinance was the city clerk was looking for cost efficiencies in the budget, and this ordinance would amend the code by eliminating the requirement that the entire agenda be published in the newspaper. And that's over on page 2 of the ordinance, page 7 of the packet, where we would be changing it to say under F that notice is to be given to the public under policies and procedures adopted under subsection J, which provides that the administration, with this change, shall develop policies and procedures to implement this section, subject to review by the council by either a resolution or an ordinance, which would simplify the process. There are also a few housekeeping changes, mostly items like, speakers don't have to identify themselves in writing because we don't do that anymore. The ordinance as presented, the principal changes on page 10 of the packet, which would change the notice of date, time, and place, and instead of publishing the whole agenda in the newspaper, would be the non-routine agenda items for each regular council meeting. And then there's later a definition, this is on page 11 of the packet, that non-routine agenda items mean scheduled public comments, public hearings, unfinished business items, ordinances for introduction, action items not appearing on the consent agenda, and executive session items. And the clerk has a cost memo in the packet, and according to the memo, making this change would result in approximately 25% savings to existing policy if that change is adopted. As you know, some members of the public get their information on what council will or will be doing soon, the next meeting, from the publication in the newspaper, as well as what we put on our website. And in my view, it's also important for members of the public to know what is going to be coming up on the meeting after the current meeting, because of the short timeline and in having to get the information together to present whatever they want to say to council. And so that's why I think that publishing more than only the public hearings of the existing meeting is something important that we should still continue to do. Thank you.
Okay, passing back the gavel.
All right. And other discussion. Councilmember Nexted.
As the other sponsor, Mr. Malloy and I worked together collaboratively on this all the way through, and knowing that kind of at the end, and it's a little bit different because usually when two sponsors sponsor an ordinance, it's just how it is, and the ordinance is what it is. But you'll notice that there's a memo at the end for me, and no surprise to Mr. Malloy. It was understood, that I intended to take it a little farther. Before I make that motion, I thought we should have discussion a little bit. But if you look at the clerk's memo and the breakdown in numbers on page 13 of the packet, the actual cost for, I think it's really a 5-month, it's all of May and through all of September. The actual cost would be $3,372. The way it is, doing the non-routine, as the ordinance is written, would drop from 3,372 to 2,537. If we only did public hearing items, it would drop down to $1,657 essentially, which is a 50% saving, not just a 25% savings. So that's the dollar and cents of it. And what I'm going to propose with amendment is to only advertise public hearing items, and that is consistent with the Peninsula or the Kenai Borough. If you look at what they advertise in the newspaper, that's what you get. And they have a lot more items typically than we do, but it's there. I think also the City of Homer, and the clerk can correct me if the City of Soldotna, I think they're just a little bit different, but pretty much that. And perhaps Seward too, but anyway, a lot of municipalities do it that way. Almost everybody has a computer or an iPhone. It's posted here at City Hall, other places, the entire agenda, and whatnot, and it's available to the public. So, after our discussion here, my intent is to reduce this just down to just public hearing items.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I like what I see here. I was just, I'm assuming on our ad, maybe this is a question for the clerk, or it's not an ad, I suppose it's just this information. It says for the full agenda, you can go to our website, it tells the public that, or where they can get it.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have any objection.
Vice Mayor Navarre, did you want to comment?
No comment.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, my thought on this is that, ultimately we have to serve the public to get them the information that is part of the city business. And I'm leaning towards this ordinance in a positive way. I just need to be sure that the public has access to the information, that it's not buried in some obscure footnote, and that if someone doesn't have access to a computer or iPhone or something, it would be perhaps in the library or some other public place. Is that the intent of doing this? My question.
The existing policy does require the clerk to put the agenda and packet for availability in the library, I believe. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Yes, that's correct.
So the ordinance wouldn't change that part of the policy. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, just one follow-up question. This is perhaps getting beyond the scope of this discussion. But what I would like to see, if we're not going to have so much paper or a newspaper exposure, perhaps during the course of our meeting, maybe it could just be read into the record by the clerk, just items that are coming up for discussion, for public hearings, for the next meeting. That way, people that do come back later and look at our recordings can say, "Oh yeah, this is an item of interest to me," and or the newspaper people, they don't come here much anymore, but they do rely on our recordings and our video. We do have a radio show going here, and I would like to make sure that at some point in time we get all the information out. If it's not written, perhaps a verbal presentation of at least the subject matter be made available. I think that's beyond the scope of this amendment tonight, or this ordinance tonight, but I would hope that we could do that. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Naxted.
Just like to ask the clerk if she had anything to add, since you're the one that does the advertising and where they go. Have we missed anything about where you can see the full agenda, or how people get it, or anything else associated with that?
Thank you, Councilmember Naxtet. No, the agenda is published, well, it's posted on the bulletin board here. It's also at the library, and it's available on our website, and I do email it to a small list of people who have signed up to get email agendas.
Councilmember Petty.
I wanted to ask the clerk, in what Councilmember Glendenning was requesting happen, what sort of time frame would that require at each city council member meeting? An estimate on that? It seems like it would be very time consuming from my point of view.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Chairman Malloy. So it's not in the scope of this ordinance because it wasn't published that way, but it would, just as long as it's my understanding that it would be everything on the consent agenda. That is what the desire is, to be read into the record prior to voting on the consent agenda. And it would be some minutes of reading.
So what I'm understanding, Councilmember Glendenning, he's wanting the whole consent agenda to be read at the city council meeting, and all the words in that? Is that what I'm understanding?
Madam Clerk?
I think Mr. Glendenning could.
Yeah, no, it would be just, it would just be topically read into the record. For example, here, just for new business, ordinance, blah, 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 amending municipal code, organization meeting to provide that the terms of office and mayor and other council members shall begin the Monday following the certification of the election. Ordinance 3093, accepting and appropriating the grant from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Ordinance number, in other words, we're talking about 3-4 minutes of verbiage that would at least alert the public to this situation is coming up. I know the city of Soldotna does it, and I believe the borough does it also. I was listening to the recording of the city of Soldotna, and I found it informative, in fact, that they did do it. But this is a discussion for another time. I'm for the most fulsome revelation of our business to the public that we can achieve in the simplest manner. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on ordinance number 30892019? Wrong button.
Oh,
Councilmember
that's
Nexted.
what's happening.
Councilmember Nexted.
Thank
I'm
you.
not-
I thought
I'm
it was
not-
me. Now I
that's-
know.
Yeah.
Thank you. I like to, at this time, go ahead and move my amendment. And there's two amendments. It's on page 14 of the packet, but they're really the same amendment. It all kind of goes together, so I don't think there's anything we can break out. I'd like to amend item C1 to read as follows, basically removing the words non-routine and adding public hearing. So one would read, notice of the date, time, and place, and the public hearing agenda items for each regular council meeting shall be published in a newspaper of general circulation no later than 3 days prior to each regular council meeting. And I'd also move to amend with that item C6 by removing in its entirety all of C6, which stated it was a definition of what non-routine agenda items were, and I think I should read it. Non-routine agenda items means scheduled public comments, public hearings, unfinished business items, ordinances for introduction, action items not appearing on the consent agenda, and executive session items.
Is there a second? Councilmember Peterkin.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Councilmember Nexted.
I don't think I want to discuss it too much more than I sort of already did, but it seemed like an appropriate time to have done it before. But this does dovetail in with other municipalities. It reduces costs here significantly. And actually, one of the items that we probably would need to take out anyway is executive session items, because if we advertise, it becomes a problem for us. But at any rate, matter of fact, I don't disagree with what Mr. Glendenning suggested earlier with that the reading in, for people that do, if there's a segment that's where they get that information. But, I think this day and age, very few people don't have some kind of electronic, typically, information. If they want to know what the council meeting is going to be about, they can certainly get that if they go to certain places or online. And all of my friends, doesn't matter what their age are, and I've got a lot of 80-plus-year-old, and they have these things too, and they know how to use them. And so anyway, I'd just appreciate moving this forward.
Vice Mayor Navarre, would you like to comment on the amendment motion?
No, I'm in favor.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on the amendment motion from council? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, from the discussion I've heard tonight, I don't think the people will be disadvantaged. There's a section in the advertisement that will alert people to the publication or the city website, and the clerk is always available to answer questions. And thank you for acknowledging at least my future consideration, and I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion by council? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on the amendment motion?
Councilmember Malloy,
No.
Vice Mayor Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat,
Yes?
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes?
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Is there any discussion on the motion as amended? Seeing and hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on ordinance number 30892019 as amended?
Vice Mayor Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat,
Yes?
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Malloy.
No.
No. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is ordinance number 30902019, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general and public safety capital project funds and accepting an assistance to firefighter grant from the Federal Emergency Management Agency for the cooperative purchase of self-contained breathing apparatus for the City of Kenai Fire Department, the Kiski Fire Department, and Central Emergency Services, sponsored by administration. Is the pleasure of council. Councilmember Peterkin.
I'd like to move that we approve ordinance number 3090-2019.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Second.
The ordinance has been, motion has been moved and seconded. Is there anybody from the general public who would like to speak to ordinance 30902019? Seeing none, we'll take it back to council. Is there any discussion from council? Councilmember Naxtat.
Just quickly, I mean, first part, I thought the memo from Tony Pryor, the deputy chief, was very clear, concise, and included a table with all the numbers, which helps me out a lot. And I appreciate that we're only going to have to pay 10% for our obligation, which is around $12,000, as opposed to $134,000 if we were going to go out and just buy them. So and I also appreciate that it wasn't just the City of Kenai that did this, it was a collaboration of the City of Kenai Central Emergency Services and Nikiski, and I think that's great, and hopefully they can continue that.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxtat. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, yeah, I agree with doing this. It's been a long time coming. Folks have been asking me about the SCBA's, and someone who used to potentially have to depend on one back in the day, I know how important they are. There's also a positive recommendation or a claim from the borough. I was at the committee meetings, and they actually said that the City of Kenai did take the lead on this, and they hosted this, and they're hoping that it's a pattern that can be replicated in the borough, both for the east and to the south. And so we are to be commended for our leadership in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Glendenning. Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I just have been talking to some of the firemen and Mr. Pryor, and I think he did a good job and really showing a need for this, and just appreciate their efforts.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Naxtat,
Yes?
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Malloy,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Navarre.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Council, we now have before us item D3, ordinance number 30912019, amending Kenai Municipal Code, Section 1710-010, mandatory connection and abandonment of old well, and Section 172010 mandatory connections and abandonment of old on-site sewer systems to clarify the intent of ordinance 3003-2018 and make housekeeping changes, sponsored by Councilmember Nexted. Pleasure of council, Councilmember Nexted.
I move to enact ordinance 3091, 2019.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Second.
The ordinance has been moved and seconded. Is there anyone and the general public who would like to speak to ordinance number 3091-2019? Seeing none, we'll bring the ordinance back to council. Is there any discussion from council? Councilmember Nexted.
Just for the public, this is really kind of more of a housekeeping item. Our code requires that if you have water or sewer within 200 feet of your residence structure, that you must connect to it. But the intent isn't for you to run your water and sewer line down the right-of-way. It is really, we want to have it if it's in front, in the right-of-way or the easement, and it's in front or behind your residence and accessible. So this basically clarifies it for both the water and the sewer, that's the intent, so long as it's within 200 feet.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, this reflects other action that we took some time ago regarding sewer, and I think it's sewer collection. And again, thank you for your effort on this, Councilman Nexted, and I'll be wholeheartedly supporting this.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I read this a couple times and printed it and read it again, and it first had some red flags. I was picturing some old family that might have their own well and septic for years, and then we're gonna force them to pull their well and hook up to ours. I don't think that's the case. I think it's more the case of if their well is in the right of way or not. Or am I thoroughly confused?
Do you want to answer that, Councilmember?
Okay.
Nexted.
You know, the example you're using, it doesn't matter if it's an existing residence. It's really not exactly what this is about per se. It's part of the code there, but and the attorney can correct me if I get this a little wrong. But the way it works now is you have a residence, you got a well and a septic, and the city runs water and sewer by. Okay, that example, as opposed to building a new house or something, they run it by. City code requires that you connect to it, and if you don't connect to it, you know, the facility is being made available. That's the intent of having water and sewer. You get charged for it, and the whole process for making somebody switch from their own well that they like to city water, I'm not real clear on how that ends up working. But if the water is available and it's within 200 feet and it's in the right of way in front of you, you're asked to connect or told to connect. You're currently.
Thank you.
know,
Yeah.
But this way, if it stops 50 feet before your property, you don't have to connect to it because you got to go out into the right of way and go 50 feet, 75 feet, you know, to the left or the right.
Yeah, I got that, and I really appreciated the example with the drawing that was provided, yeah, because I was like lost, and then I saw that, and it made a lot of sense, so thank you for answering that.
And I just want to say that I agree with Councilmember Peterkin. I also appreciate the drawing of the two scenarios that you had in your memo on page 22 of the packet, where you compare visually the previous ordinance and what we're fixing here. So thank you for doing that. Is there any other discussion from council? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I would ask the clerk to call for the vote.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes?
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Malloy,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Nextet,
Yes?
motion passes.
Council, now we're on to resolution number 201967, establishing dates for regular meetings of the City Council for 2020, sponsored by the City Clerk. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Nexted.
I move for approval of resolution 2019-67.
I second.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Peterkin. Is there anyone from the general public who would like to speak to Resolution 201967? Seeing none, we'll take it back to council. Is there any discussion from council? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I saw this, my initial take on it is, oh my God, we're gonna have 2 meetings in July, and then I looked at the memorandum, and it describes a very real scenario where we might have to have the second meeting. And also, if you look practically at the calendar, the second meeting is actually in the middle of the month. So I will be supporting this. I believe the previous idea that we'd only have 1 meeting in July is that sometimes the meetings were scheduled, you know, in the third or later in the third week of July. And I thank the clerk for pointing this out to us.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion from council?
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there any objection?
No
Seeing-
objection.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Navarre. Seeing and hearing none, resolution number 201967 is approved. Next item is resolution number 201968, approving a memorandum of agreement between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Alaska Region, Alaska State Parks, and the City of Kenai for a gateway to public lands display in the Kenai Municipal Airport, sponsored by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxted.
I move for approval of Resolution 2019-68.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilmember Peterkin. It's been moved and seconded. Is there anybody from the general public who would like to speak to Resolution 201968? Seeing none, we'll take it back to council. Any discussion? Councilmember Naxted.
Yeah, just because I did cover the Airport Commission meeting, and then I won't have to talk about it later, I suppose, as much. There was discussion on this, and it was approved by the Airport Commission. The displays that the Fish and Wildlife have are most of those animals that we have. There are a lot of animals down there. They also want to have some interactive displays too, I think, where you come up to a map, press something, and something else pops up. Kind of more modern type of stuff that is fun for kids and kids like me too, I suppose. But anyway, I definitely support this. I just wanted to pass on some of the vision that they're looking at for our new airport, actually.
Is there any other discussion from council? And I would, just like to say that, yes, Kenai is the gateway to those public lands, so I also support this. I don't know if unanimous consent was requested.
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there any objection?
No objection.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Navarre. Seeing and hearing none, the resolution is approved. We are now on to resolution number 201969, awarding non-exclusive on-airport car rental concession to EAN Holdings LLC for the period of December 1, 2019 through June 30, 2021, sponsored by administration. What's the pleasure of council? Councilmember Naxted.
I'll move for approval of Resolution 2019-69.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councilmember Peterkin. The resolution's been moved and seconded. Is there anyone from the general public who would like to speak to resolution number 201969 tonight? Seeing none, we'll take it back to council. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Naxted.
This also was on the airport's meeting last week. EAN is Enterprise, Alamo, and National. It's all kind of one entity there, and of course it was approved with the Airport Commission. The only comment they had that was answered was, how many would there be enough parking for all these new cars and all of that that'd be out there, and apparently there is plenty of room for them.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxted. Is there any other discussion by council?
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there any objection?
No objection.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Navarre. Hearing and seeing none, the resolution is approved. Now we're on to resolution number 201970, approving a standard lease form for city lands outside the airport reserve, sponsored by administration. What's the pleasure of council? Councilmember Naxton.
Okay, I move for approval of Resolution 2019-70.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Second.
The resolution's been approved, moved and seconded. Is there anyone from the general public who would like to speak to it before action is taken? Seeing none, we'll take it back to council. Is there any council discussion? Councilmember Naxton.
Well, I have one for Mr. Bloom.
Go ahead.
Typically, I don't think we approve forms. Forms change and all of that, and they don't come back to council. I'm not sure if this is a different situation, and if it's not, is there an amendment that would be appropriate? If you needed to make a minor change, that doesn't have to come back to council if we're approving a form?
City Attorney Bloom.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxted, Councilmember Malloy. So our code specifically calls out, in this case, that the council has to approve it. So unless we change the code, it's gonna have to come, I mean, we can make, I mean, it's designed to fill in dates and for different scenarios that you can take clauses out of it that aren't applicable, but to change the form, it would have to come back to council.
Thank you. I should have asked earlier.
So following up, Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, just a question. Looking at this holistically, the major changes that we're clarifying that everything is city lands, and there are some airport lands that have a clause in them that needs special attention. Is that correct? It's a big housekeeping initiative.
That sounds like a question for legal. City Attorney Bloom.
Thank you, Councilmember Malloy, Councilmember Glendenning. That's pretty much true because we're treating lands that are restricted by the FAA that are outside the airport reserve. There's special language regarding like how high you could build if they're, you know, in the flight path or that sort of thing that would have to travel with it.
Yes, go ahead.
And then with that explanation, then just looking at it, not too much has changed then regarding our lease protocols. Is that right? In other words, at the end of the lease, the dwellings, buildings on the property revert to the city in this case?
City Attorney Bloom.
Thank you, Councilmember Glendenning. No, like on the airport reserve, it is that the improvements go, whoever builds them, the lessee, retains ownership. So there's a process where if the lease was assigned, the lessee could sell the improvements to the assignee, or they would have to remove them if they wanted to get the value out of them, or the city could sell them for them through an auction or a new lease process. So it does very closely mirror the new lease form for on-airport reserve that we put a lot of time and effort into really changing. This one has few changes from that newer product.
Okay, well, thank you for answering my leading question. Just one more. Then valuation of these properties would be established by an appraisal at the appropriate time in the process. Is that correct?
Right. Thank you, Councilmember Glendenning. So valuation follows the code process that's laid out in code that if it's never been appraised, we would get an appraisal. If it's been appraised, we would increase the rent based on a CPI adjustment to that valuation, 8% of the appraised value, and then keep adjusting that by CPI.
Okay, and then one more question. It was mentioned in the literature that if someone wanted to lease and then buy, this language is still being developed. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat that question.
Yes. It said in the literature that if someone wanted to lease and then buy the property, I understand that concept is still being developed, so someone could successfully purchase the property after leasing, or perhaps even initially just say, I want to lease and buy?
Yes, so that is provided for in the city's code, and then on the application forms, you could apply for a lease with an option to purchase. The option to purchase is not included in the lease because I'm not comfortable, as Councilmember Naxted mentioned, that this is a standard lease form. We haven't done a whole lot of those before, and I'm not comfortable that we can standardize them enough to put in the lease form. So it would be, the option to purchase would be a separate document, which I think is an acceptable way to move forward.
Okay, so we have a far more flexible process than currently in code. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any other discussion by council? I'd just like to say that I think it's a really good work product following up on our code changes on city-owned land, so I support it. I don't recall if unanimous consent was requested.
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxted. Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there any objection?
No objection.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Navarre. Seeing and hearing none, resolution number 201970 is approved. It's been brought to my attention that there is an error in the dates in the resolution previous, resolution number 201969, so that we may need to ask for reconsideration of that resolution. It's the one immediately before this, so that we can fix the date error. And I'd ask the city manager to pass the information on to Councilmember Naxted. And this is a little bit out of the process, but I'd like to ask the city manager to just explain what the date error is, if he would, for the information of council.
Thank you, Chair Malloy. So I did notice, just as the council was passing this resolution, that the title and section 1, there's a conflict between the two. The title is accurate in that this award is for a period from December 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2021, whereas section 1 reflected that it was a 5-year term starting in December 1st, 2019. So section 1 should be amended to state that it's for the period of December 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2021, so that it's consistent with the title.
So, Councilmember Naxted.
Yeah, I'd go ahead and move for reconsideration of resolution 2019-69.
Councilmember Peterkin.
I'd go ahead and second that.
Thank you. Now, I believe we need to vote on whether we reconsider it or not, and then then it goes back to the position it was before we passed it. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Yes, that's correct.
So this vote would be on whether to reconsider.
Yes.
So Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Councilmember Malloy.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Navarre.
Yes.
Councilmember Naxted.
Yes?
Councilmember Petty.
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah.
Did I skip anybody? Motion passes. I lost track of where I was.
So,
Sorry.
so now we would need a motion to amend resolution number 201969. Councilmember Naxted.
Yeah, I move to amend section 1 along the lines of what our city manager suggested. I'll move to eliminate it and then replace with, it's probably just easier to read it that way, that the city manager is authorized to sign a non-exclusive on-airport car rental concession to EAN Holdings, LLC, for the period of December 1 through 2019 through June 30th, 2021, period.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councilmember Peterkin.
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there any objection?
None.
Seeing and hearing none, now we have resolution number 201969 as amended. Councilmember Naxted.
Move for approval of 2009, never mind. Request unanimous consent.
Thank you.
That's what I meant.
Unanimous consent has been requested to the resolution as amended. Is there any objection?
No objection.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Navarre. Seeing and hearing none, resolution number 201969 as amended is approved. And I want to thank the clerk and city manager for bringing that to our attention so we could fix it tonight. So now we move on to item 8. This is a resolution number 201971, repealing policy number 201702, supervisory subcommittee, sponsored by Councilmember Naxted. Councilmember Naxted.
I move for approval of resolution 2019-71.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Second.
The resolution's been moved and seconded. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak to resolution number 201971 tonight? Seeing none, we'll take it back to council. Pleasure of council, Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you. Council has 3 employees that we work with directly, the clerk, the city manager, and the attorney. And we annually have a review of them as a group. This policy that I'm looking at repealing here has an extra step in it where a group of 3 of the council would have an intermediate review of the 3 employees and discuss with them. And it doesn't seem to me that, it seems to me that, in most corporations that, you have an annual review, you don't have 2 annual reviews. And in this particular case with 7 council, it seems that we do pretty well in it's usually an April, review. And I'm not so sure that it's really needed. If we did feel like it was needed, let's say we wanted to do it in November, also, we could do it as a group. We could do it with 1 or all 3. And I think that if one of the employees, if you will, wanted to have a review for some reason, we'd most likely agree to that and do it too. If there's something that they wanted to share with us and in their goals and whatnot. So I'm just suggesting that it's not really absolutely necessary. When I suggested putting this together with Mr. Bloom, if it's all right, I did ask him to ask around with the other employees and the HR director, and there was no objection to this. Not that they just had no objections. They didn't say they were for it or against it, just no objections. So it was inquired. Thank you.
Councilmember Glendening.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Naxted, for pointing this out. Yeah, it's my observation that this thing has hardly been used, and Councilor Naxted in his memo and explanation suggested that we all do it together, and I think that's the proper way to do. We should work in concert, in theme and theory together, and if something comes up along the way, well, then we can meet and work on an issue. But I don't think that as constituted now that this is a necessary function of the city council, and I wholeheartedly support Councilman Naxted in this effort. Thank you.
Chair Malloy.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Navarre. You've got the floor.
Thank you. I'll be speaking against this resolution. If we need to amend, I realize we haven't always made, as it says, every quarter a meeting, but through the years that we have had this in place, first it was myself and Mayor Gabriel and Councilmember Malloy, and then this last year it's been Councilmember Naxted and Mayor Gabriel and myself. And I think it's good to hear from your employees. There's not a mechanism. Normally employees do have a boss that they can go to. When you have 7 bosses, it makes it a little different. Sometimes you can even have problems with the 7 bosses, and they just want to communicate that. And a group of 3, and I'm okay if we want to bring the policy back in front of us and make some changes to it, such as different members serving and a different way of doing that. I can tell you I was involved in council when we had concerns with all 3 employees and they weren't working together and communicating. I believe they are working very well and communicating very well as it is right now. That doesn't mean that'll always be the case. And I don't think you wait till you react instead of be proactive. And I believe these get-togethers are a positive thing for the employees. I do think the policy needs to come back. Maybe there needs to be an executive session at the end after those meetings, so the full council can be briefed on, discussions that happened. But personally, and it's my understanding this year we just missed one meeting so far. Matter of fact, I heard about this resolution when I was in talking to the clerk about setting up the meeting in November. So we weren't trying not to do it. I think having a precursor to the get-together is a positive thing, but there's the other two meetings possibly through the year that there can just be discussion in general about how they're going with their goals, and any questions or concerns or things that come up. As you know, we're a small city with single people in departments, and things can happen, but I personally would hope that the council votes this resolution down and that the policy comes back before us. And then when we review the policy in its full discussion, determine whether we should amend it. And I too would like to wait, at least postpone this until myself and Mayor Gabriel are in person at the council meeting to further discuss this. But I think it's a very valuable tool, and it's being proactive instead of reactive. But I do want to follow our own policy, and that's why I would like it to say that it's not mandatory we have 4 meetings a year, but meetings as necessary or something like that. So with that, I'll end my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Navarre. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I think just for consistency, I think we have our annual reviews, and we have opportunity to meet with employees individually along the way. There's a invite, for me and I suppose all the rest of you to meet with city manager in the near future, and just informal talks and situational awareness. I think should suffice. If there's a review going on or suggestions being made, and other people are involving themselves with my employee, I'd kind of like to know. If we're going to do it, we should all do it together, not individually as a discrete group. And so I will be supporting, again, I will say I'm supporting Councilman Nackstedt in this resolution. Thank you.
Councilmember Petty.
Yes, thank you. I can see the validity of Vice Mayor Navarre, and would like to move to postpone this until, have an executive session on this resolution. And I'm not sure the process to make that happen, but I'm making that suggestion.
So first, okay. Councilmember Peterkin.
I'd second that if it's needs to be.
Thank you. So the motion to postpone has been moved and seconded. I think there may be an issue for legal with respect to an executive session. I'm not sure that which is different than postponement, that the subject matter qualifies for executive session.
Chairman Malloy.
Yes, Vice Mayor Navarre.
And I do appreciate the motion, but I would move to amend and
Okay.
take out the executive session wording.
Okay, so that takes care of that issue. And I apologize. I don't recall if there was a date certain for the postponement. Okay. So and I don't know if there was a second to the amendment motion. Somebody could help me out with that.
Yeah, it would probably need a date certain and then a second, Dave.
Okay, there's been an amendment motion that's been seconded. I would ask the maker of the amendment motion if he wanted to, with the consent of the second, amend the amendment motion to put in a date certain.
I would do that to the next meeting of the city council,
Okay, so
regular meeting.
the clerk can correct me, but I believe the motion there's a motion to amend the motion to postpone resolution number 201971 to the next council meeting. Is that accurate?
So what we're considering right now is to remove the executive session requirement and have this be postponed to November 6th.
Okay, thank
And I
you.
need a second.
And a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so first off, is there any discussion on this motion? Councilmember Peterkin.
I'd just like to ask the clerk so far, has anyone asked to be excused to the November meeting, so we're sure that hopefully everyone can be here?
Not that I'm aware of. Nobody's said anything.
Thank you.
Councilmember
Request
Knapp.
unanimous consent on my motion.
So unanimous consent has been requested on the motion. Does anyone object? Councilmember Naxted?
No, I'm not objecting. What I was going to say was that I didn't realize or I forgot that Mayor Gabriel wasn't going to be here tonight. And I think it would be appropriate for him to be part of this discussion.
And-
So I wouldn't have any objection to the postponement.
And I would agree with that. I mean, as my recollection is that the original policy that the Mayor Gabriel was the sponsor of the original policy. So I think it's certainly appropriate for the council to extend that courtesy to him. So I'd ask the clerk again to tell us what we're voting on right at this vote.
Now we're moving on postponement as amended.
Postponement as amended.
Request unanimous consent.
There you go.
So unanimous consent has been requested to postponement as amended to the next meeting. Is there any objection to unanimous consent on that postponement?
No objection.
Hearing and seeing none, resolution number 201971 is postponed to our next council meeting. Now we're on to committee and commission reports. Does anyone on council need a short break or want a short break of 5 minutes before we move on to reports? Looks like we're ready to rock and roll. Okay. So, Council on Aging. Councilmember Glendening.
I'm the aged counselor? You are. Okay. Yes, Council on Aging had an October 10th meeting over at the Senior Center. Some of the items that they are working on is they are working on a code of conduct for the Senior Center in concert with our city attorney and our city manager. And what it does, it will just bring our code of conduct, our expectations for our clients at the Senior Center to match up with both state and federal expectations. And all things, just simple things, cell phone courtesy. If you're going to have a caregiver, they have to maybe have a certain standard. There's going to be a work session on the 29th of October.
Excuse me, Councilmember Naxted. Go ahead, Councilmember Glendening.
Yeah, okay, to discuss these issues. They're interviewing for a janitor. They're talking about a Halloween party for kids on the 31st. They're coming up with a source for fish, salmon and halibut. There seems to be some federal funds available to procure those items for our locals, and they're very, very, very excited about that. And also during at the meeting, there was a motion made and unanimously acclaimed that Councilor Glendenning be appointed next year to the Council on Aging as liaison. So I just thought I would pass that on as part of the meeting record. Thank you. Next meeting is the 14th of November.
Thank you, Councilmember Glendenning, and that will be on a future agenda item. Next is Airport Commission.
Yes.
Councilmember Petty.
Councilmember Nexted covered for me, and he will give that report for me, and the next Airport Commission will be on November the 14th. Councilmember Nexted.
Councilmember
The next
Nexted.
date was about the only thing I had left to talk about. But I do want to apologize to Councilmember Glendenning for sidebarring. I just wanted to make sure, since the city manager was going to talk about the terminal building, there was some discussion about some aspects going on there. I'm going to let him discuss that during his report. But the two things that the Airport Commission did talk about that I mentioned earlier, because it was in our business tonight, was the memorandum agreement with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the display, and also the EAN Holdings request for on airport car rental businesses. So, and of course, those were approved unanimously, and everybody has the date for the next meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember Nexted. Harbor Commission. Councilmember Peterkin.
We didn't meet this month, and I would have to check with the clerk, but I don't think we're meeting next month.
November 4th.
The 4th. Okay, it's not on the, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Parks and Recreation Commission. Councilmember Nexted.
Thank you. Parks and Rec met on October 3rd. They had a discussion item regarding the multi-purpose facility improvements, and what they're looking at doing is getting some banners that look kind of like these, but there's sidebarring going on, so they can't see. And so I'll show them over here. And but I had to do that under the circumstance. But anyway, so these will be long-standing banners that will be that they hope to have installed. They're looking at 3 of them, and they'll be about $800 for all 3. Another thing that they generally discussed was when you go into the multi-purpose facility, there's they look like blue tarps in the doorway, and I think it looks Alaskan because everybody's wood pile or roof that leaks has blue tarps, but they're actually a special kind of tarp, and I think they're getting old and aged, and they're looking at replacing them maybe with something a little more attractive, and they do serve a pretty good purpose, keeping the heat in the wintertime there. So that was just another discussion, and also maybe some other ways of sprucing up the building, with some murals or something like that as a possibility. Generally discussion there, and their next meeting will be November 7th.
Thank you, Councilmember Nexted. Planning and Zoning Commission did not have a meeting, and their next meeting is October 30th. Beautification Committee, Vice Mayor Navarre.
I actually was supposed to cover for Tim.
Oh,
and,
thank you, Councilmember Peterkin. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I promptly missed the meeting, and I apologize.
The next meeting is January 14th.
And they didn't have a quorum.
And there was no meeting. There was no quorum, so thank you. Mini Grant Steering Committee, this is a report by Mayor Gabriel. The committee granted $200 to Mountain View Elementary School to paint pumpkins with the children at the Pumpkin Festival, and the funds will allow the school to continue to offer pumpkin painting in future years. And I just want to supplement that by saying the Pumpkin Festival was awesome last Saturday. Administration reports. City Manager.
Thank you, Chair Malloy. So on October 3rd, actually the day after our last council meeting, I met with Mayor Charlie Pierce and his staff about a proposal that's coming forward with them to increase fees at the solid waste facility for both municipal solid waste and for our wastewater treatment plant sewage sludge. So it's going to be twofold, the potential impacts of the city depending on where it goes. So for the municipal solid waste, that's going to impact primarily commercial businesses in town that have dumpsters on their properties. That waste stream is now going to face an additional cost. So it's going to be up to those haulers on how they offset those additional costs that they're going to incur, but almost certainly there will be some of those costs that's passed on to those commercial businesses. The second part is the wastewater treatment plant sewage sludge. Of course, that impacts, I think, exclusively the city of Kenai and Soldotna. So there will be some increase in costs for both Soldotna and Kenai. And, it was a good discussion with Mayor Pierce and his staff about the justification for it. But I know that this proposal is coming up, and it'll certainly generate a lot of discussion from a lot of different entities on, and the final result, it'll be interesting to see where that ends up. On the 7th of October, I did a tour of the golf course. Actually, Christine Cunningham and I did. It was like the day or two after they shut down the course. The first thing we saw when we got in the golf carts was a 40-inch bull moose walking across one of the greens. Got tangled up in some of the netting, so only in Alaska golf course you'll see that. But we talked about the capital projects that they got planned over the course of the next few years. The bridge that they put in this last spring looks great. Did a nice job on that. One of the big things that they are facing is the number of spruce bark beetle trees that are going to be killed, and it's going to take a significant effort to keep on top of that as they continue to die on the course. But the course was looking good, and they said they had a really good summer, primarily because the weather was so un-Alaskan. Library director update. As you know, we interviewed 4 individuals. The first time we went through this, we did not hire out of that group. We interviewed 4 more this last week. We're not going to hire out of that group, so we're going out for a third time. We just issued the new recruitment yesterday, so we're going out for a third time here. Hopefully, a third time's the charm. I know that Mary Jo Joyner says that the library director of a municipality our size is one of the most difficult positions to fill, and this one is certainly proving to be that. Doc Hansen gave you an update on the historic doctor's cabin tonight, so I won't give you any more on that. Did want to let you know that Mary Toll, our temporary lands technician, finished up her first job today. So the draft land management plan has been completed. So the next step is going to be to take that draft and work on it administratively. And once we get the second draft done, it'll be coming to council and to other commissions. But she formally submitted her final memo and is completed with all 385 parcels. So she did a phenomenal job, and I'm sure she'll be involved in this next step as well. I did want to provide an update on something that happened at the airport terminal project. So the bathrooms right now, the north bathrooms in the terminal have been shut down, so the only bathrooms that are open are the south terminal. There were some complaints from the public that the amount of toilet paper that was being supplied in the south bathroom wasn't enough. We are administratively, I know Mary and her crew are trying to keep on top of that as much as they can. There was also a concern that once both the north and south were done, that the new bathrooms would not have enough storage for toilet paper there. We're certainly going to keep an eye on it as we open it up once the terminal is open. I did talk to the architect, and apparently there is a specification for the amount of toilet paper that should be provided for an airport our size and with the number of folks that are there. And he assures me that they went through that process and it should be sufficient. But we'll look at that and determine it. As we open up both bathrooms, if we do have a problem, we'll have to look at potentially changing that. And the last thing I have is bluff erosion. So our request started here at Alaska, it went to regional, then it went to headquarters. It had now been routed to the Assistant Secretary of the Army of Civil Works for their consideration. That's the final step in getting approval to move ahead with the design. I've reached out to our congressional delegation to see if maybe they might want to encourage the ASA-CW to sign that quickly. So I'm hopeful that we'll see something soon, but that certainly, it's been making progress over the last couple of weeks, and I'm hopeful that we're going to see something real soon. That's the end of my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Questions for the city manager? Councilmember
Chairman
Glendon.
Malloy.
Yes, Vice Mayor Navarre.
Yes, sorry, Jim. I didn't see your hand.
You have the floor.
Thanks. Any word on, are we going to see an ordinance or that dealing with the online sales tax issue that's being moved? Have you met with the borough on that, or where they're at?
City manager?
Yeah,
Ostrander.
thank you, Chair Malloy. Vice Mayor Navarre, I believe City Attorney Bloom is going to give the council an update on the progress of the online sales tax. He went to a meeting today that I was unable to attend, so he was going to update the council on that during his report.
That's fine, thanks.
Do you have other questions, Vice Mayor Navarre?
None, thank you.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, just a question about the bathroom fixtures. Is there fewer fixtures provided in the new remodel than there were in the old regime?
City Manager Ostrander.
Thank you, Chair Malloy. Councilmember Glendenning. Mary might actually be able to answer that better, but what I believe the issue is that the old fixtures had more storage in them. They're large ones that store multiple different rolls of toilet paper, and the new ones don't store as many. So it's not less fixtures. It's the same number of fixtures, it's just that toilet paper storage is less in this remodel.
Weren't there more stools, say, across from the restaurant? Wasn't there two? Now there's one?
So would you, City Manager, would you like the airport manager to answer that?
Yeah, she can go ahead and answer that.
Yes. Is this on? Okay. The south bathrooms, the women's bathroom, did not have a handicap stall in it previously. It does, and so that, yes, they're down to one stall and a handicap stall at the south end. And Paul's correct, we used to have the big commercial rolls in the dispenser, and now there's just like 2 household rolls in the dispensers.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Glendenning?
Yeah, I think we can fix it, right?
Yes, we are going to fix it.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Is there, what I think I heard is there's more toilets now than there was before, or the same amount?
Actually, at the south end, there's one less. Due to the advisory circular that we followed for a handicap stall in the south end.
Thanks.
Thank you, Airport Manager Bondurant. Councilmember Naxted.
So we keep talking about, so that's the south end, and by not talking about the north end, it means it stays the same.
Airport Manager Bondurant.
Yes, the north end will stay the same.
Other questions for the city manager? Seeing none, we'll move on to the city attorney report and Vice Mayor Navarre's question.
Thank you, Chairman Malloy. So as our clerk sent out last Friday a notice from AML to all of you, and the city manager, the finance director, and I have been meeting with the borough on and off throughout the last 6 months or however long on online sales tax and how we're going to move forward. Today, the finance director and I met with the borough to go over the documents that were provided in the attachment to you from the clerk. And it looks like we're at the point right now where the borough will be introducing a resolution on November 5th, and we will be introducing a resolution on November 6th to authorize the city manager to enter into an intergovernmental remote seller sales tax agreement. And so what this first step will be is that the municipalities that sign on to this will become members of a commission. And that commission will then form bylaws, and pursuant to those bylaws, we'll move forward with a software company that will help the municipalities, and AML will be doing a lot of the administrative work to come up with a software program to enable us to collect online sales tax. A big part of this is that the case law that brought all this about indicates that we need to have a centralized collection point and certain similar definitions of aspects that apply to sales tax within everybody's code. So the sellers of online products only have to interact with one entity and don't have to decipher 100 different sales tax codes in order to collect sales tax in Alaska. So this first step, by signing this onto this agreement, I would say, at least Terry and I still have some concerns as to how this is moving forward, but we hope that by signing on to this and becoming members of the commission, that we can help shape it in the way that we want it to go forward. And if it doesn't work out the way we want, we can get out of it with 30 days notice and form a next step of legislation. So the borough and the municipalities within the borough are actually set up pretty well, because I believe there's the potential for the borough and the cities within the borough to have 6 commissioners. So we should have a pretty loud voice on the commission. Funding-wise, right now the idea is that the software company will work based on a percentage of sales tax, so we're not going to have to commit a whole bunch of money up front to develop the software. They're going to take that risk with the expected returns of a percentage of sales tax. If there's any questions on that, I'm happy to answer them.
Are there any questions on that point of his report? Councilmember Petty.
Thank you. I know that on some zip codes in the city, sales tax has been collected from companies, online sales. What has happened to those taxes? Have they just gone into the clear blue, or has the city actually been getting those?
City Attorney Bloom.
Thank you. Terry can answer if I don't provide enough information, but it's my understanding that the city has received the taxes that have been collected for addresses within the city of Kenai.
Do you need to hear further from the findings? Okay, thank you. Councilmember Peterkin.
Can we give some of our sales tax as a percentage to a software company? Is that legal to do?
City Attorney Bloom.
I sure hope so. Yeah, I think so, yeah. I mean, it's maybe a more interesting question for the borough, who's dedicated their sales tax revenue to their school district, but for us, we don't have restrictions on what we do with our sales tax monies.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the city attorney on this point? Seeing none, do you have anything else you would like to report?
I do have one more short topic to report on. I returned last night from a conference in Denver, Colorado. It was the American Association of Airport Executives Law Workshop, and it was a real good 2.5 days kind of mix of some basic airport law and some advanced concepts, and learning topics included airport finance, grant assurances, concessions within the airport. We spent an hour talking about the PFAS, the pollution from the firefighting foams. Colorado was actually one of the first states. The Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, I think, was one of the first sites that was detected for pollution. Contracting, leases, and TSA, so it was really good. I came back with a lot of questions for Mary and just stuff to talk to her about. Not that we're doing anything wrong, but I got, I certainly became more knowledgeable and just want to follow up with Mary, and I think it'll be really good for me going forward and working with the airport. It's, to me, it was really interesting. The Denver airport brings in $29 billion of revenue a year to the city, and it employs 30,000 people. It was unbelievable. I mean, and the conference did a really good job speaking to topics that were relevant for both large airports like that and then smaller airports like ours, and even general airports that don't have the Part 139 certification. So it was really good all around for me. And I appreciate council funding my budget so I can go to these conferences.
Thank you, City Attorney Bloom, and I'd like to comment that I agree with you. I think council's always supported continuing education for its 3 employees, and the city really benefits from that, and thank you for doing it. Councilmember Glendening.
I'm just going to chime in and say it sounds like money well spent, and thank you for your focus on this issue.
City Clerk.
Thank you, Chair Malloy. Sorry, I just have to write down the time so I can timestamp it later. I was gonna say that committee and commission terms end on December 31st, and so we're gonna start recruiting for committee and commission members coming up, so that we do have some vacancies as well, so we'll need to fill vacancies in addition to the terms that are expiring. And also, I have a document here for everyone to sign for the election certification, so please don't leave too quickly. And that's all I have.
Thank you. The City Manager Ostrander has something else to add to his report. City Manager Ostrander.
Thank you, Chair Malloy. Scott's report reminded me, I should let the council know, I am headed to Nashville, Tennessee on Saturday for the International City Managers Association conference. It's the primary conference, actually the only conference I go to annually. About 6,000 to 7,000 city managers from across the world. It's the primary city managers conference in the country. So I'll be there from Saturday until Wednesday, and then also on Thursday of next week I'll be at the Board of Fish following up on the ombudsman's ruling that they violated OMA, and they're going to reconsider the location. So I will be out of the office Monday through Thursday of next week, either in Nashville or Anchorage.
Thank you, City Manager Ostrander. I appreciate you going to Nashville to that conference, and also getting right back and going to the Board of Fish. Thank you. So that brings us to additional public comment. Is there anyone from the general public who would like to speak to council at this time? Seeing none, back to council for council comments. Councilmember Petty, would you like to go first?
Thank you, sir. Good work for everyone tonight, and that ends my comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Glendening.
Yes, I went to the Pumpkin Festival this weekend, and it was a real joy, a lot of fun, and it was just a steady stream of people, and the exhibits were well attended. I noticed that hayride was just constantly going, and I got a little scratch in my throat, so I appreciated the cider that the city did provide, and that was a good thing. Just a reminder, we have the census coming up here in 2020, and the goal is to count everyone, because everyone counts. And that's kind of maybe too cute by half, but it's real. The census provides us with our foundation for political power, our representation, how we select a number of public officials. And secondly, there's federal funds that are involved too, disbursement of federal funds. They're done by individuals or the population in a certain area. So it'll be important that we focus and support the efforts of the census. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder, Councilmember Glendening. And before I forget, I'd just like to go out of order to call on Vice Mayor Navarre, who's participating by telephone, so I won't forget. Vice Mayor Navarre.
Thank you. I just want to say, look forward to working with Jim and Glenise again for another 3 years. So thanks for coming and taking your oath of office. And I guess that's it for tonight. Everybody have a good night, and see you back in town on Monday.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Navarre. Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I didn't make the Pumpkin Fest, but I did see it in the paper, and it looked like a great success, and appreciate that we do that. I also was able to attend a couple of Brown Bear games this weekend. We had a great season opener. Didn't quite make the third game, but we we did real well, and that we had really good attendance, so it's real nice to see for local sports. So, thanks.
Councilmember Naxted.
I guess the last 2 weeks I've been really busy with city business, doing city things, so it didn't allow me to have a lot of extra time. I really wanted to go to the Pumpkin Festival, but because I only had so much time, I was busy removing wallpaper and glue off the wall, and I really wanted to be in Kenai rather than there, but it had to be done sometime. But that's all I've got. I just regret I didn't make it.
Thank you. I just want to add that there was a new item at the festival this year, which was a kind of a bale of hay maze with a tunnel at the end, and there was a long line for it. The kids really were really enjoying that. I also, want to say that I appreciate working with Councilmember Naxted on the ordinance, on the publication that we dealt with tonight. It was a good exercise in, working together and collaborating on something where you don't agree totally. But it was, we, with the assistance of, our management team, particularly our city clerk and city attorney, were able to put together a package in a way to present it, for the council to decide how they wanted to move forward with that. So I wanted to thank Councilmember Naxted for, the collaboration on that. Other than that, I did kind of skip over the mayor's report, but that was because he wasn't here to give it. I appreciate Vice Mayor Navarre participating by telephone tonight, and it was great to have our people that are helping us with marketing make the journey up here to visit with us. Thank them for that again. We have no executive session. There are no pending items, so we have no other business before us. So we're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.